This week saw letters of intention on precautionary suspension issued to 3 Transnet officials, including top dog Siyabonga Gama, Tamsanqa Giani and Ms. Lindiwe Mhleche, because of the alleged appalling mismanagement of Transnet. Joining us now in the fix is Dr. Popo Molefe. He's, of course, the board chairperson, not the CEO. Apologies for that earlier. And he now joins us in the studio. Welcome to the fix, board chair.
Thank you, Karima, and good evening.
You don't have an easy task. You have 3 forensic reports that have been drafted, one from Worksman's, one from the Treasury, and one from MNS. I'm sitting with the one from MNS that says Mr. Siyabonga Gama's offense was that he increased the ETC of Transnet from 38.6 billion to 54 billion. And it says the alleged legislation or the alleged breach of the legislation includes the Companies Act, Section 76. And of course, it says that he's also in breach of Section 57 of the PMFA. And the recommendation says disciplinary proceedings must be instituted against Mr. Gama for being part of the team that misrepresented the true reason and the extent of the increase of the initial ETC. Now, you have placed a lot of emphasis on proper procedure, on the fact that we are, in the rule of law, and that these people are going to be put through a process. But just now, the other day, you appeared in front of Parliament, and there Mr. Gama was, knowing full well that he is going to be given a notice of suspension and that he must actually forward reasons within 7 days and tell you why he ought not to be suspended.
Well, I suppose that question could be better answered by Parliament, the Portfolio Committee, because in their invitation, they said they wanted the chair of the board, the GCE, and the chief financial officer. So he was there because he was invited by Parliament. Although, of course, as you would have seen, Parliament then said, but how do we talk to you when we know that you have been served with a letter of notice of precautionary suspension? But he had to be there because he was asked to be there.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question? This report, the MNS report, and I'm not sure when the Treasury report was done, MNS report, the one we're looking at, was signed off on June 5. So it's quite a long time. I mean, it's almost 3 months before you act against them. What is happening in that period? Why did it take so long?
No, Peter, the report was not signed off.
It's published on.
They said it's a preliminary report.
Sure.
And as a matter of fact, they only tightened up, I think, this past week. Okay. But of course, that does not, nothing contradicts the facts as contained in the preliminary report until, of course, the hearing itself takes place and contrary evidence is adduced.
Would you expect these hearings to be sort of consequential, or
then you say we took time? We've got to follow a process, and Karima correctly points out, we've got to constantly remember that this country believes in a rule of law. You've got to allow people to go through a process. There's something very interesting that has come to my attention because I check things continually. I discovered that in Transnet, the delegations of authority were changed to say that only the minister can suspend a group CEO, which in itself is in conflict with the provisions of the Companies Act, which says that the ultimate authority of a company is the board of directors. So we've got to deal with that question. So, because if it is as it is stated by me, it means that we as a board would do our work and then recommend to the minister.
You've taken over a toxic mess.
It's a cocktail.
It's the biggest transport utility on the continent.
Yeah.
And it's a mess. I mean, much as Karima was reading out you know, the recommendations about Siyabonga Gama, Tamsan Kajiani, it's much the same thing. The request for proposals did not comply with Treasury regulations. They recommend disciplinary action. That's going to happen. I mean, whatever the opposition, that's going to happen, I presume, in time.
Well, we have to act in accordance with the factors put in the report. They can absolve themselves through the evidence. That can be produced. I don't know where the facts will come from because they were not given to the investigators. So we will proceed.
Okay. Sorry, Karim.
No.
I think it is important.
What fascinates me, Dr. Molefe, is we were buying, what was it, 1,000 and something locomotives.
64.
You know, like, why did we need so many? And why did they all have to come from one group of people, South China Rail or North China Rail? I mean, how did we make the assessment that that is what we required?
Well, let me correct a couple of things. The first point, Karima, is that they don't come from only two OEMs, that original manufacturer of equipment, original equipment manufacturers. They come from 4 of them. It's China South Rail, China North Rail, Bombardier, and General Electric, Bombardier Transport. So it's 4 of them. The Transnet developed what was called market development strategy. And that strategy projected that there was going to be a rise in volumes of resources, manganese, iron ore, and coal, that they would have to export. And it therefore became necessary for them to increase their capacity the capacity of freight rail to move those volumes of manganese. Of course, they had already procured for the coal line the 95 and the other 100 earlier on. The question is whether the strategy should have been such that all of them are procured at once.
Yes.
I suppose experts need to deal with that question. We are the biggest procurer of locomotives in the entire world. Nobody has ever, at any given time, procured as
And we don't have a decent public transport system. Isn't that a complete irony?
I think part of the critical issues we have to deal with as we go forward and as we review our own strategy is whether the projections as given in the market demand strategy resulting in us procuring these many locomotives
was reasonable.
Is still relevant in the current period. If it is not relevant, do we need to begin to engage the OEMs on whether we should review the scope of their work? And of course, in doing so, you may want to look at what is the delivery schedules, who has delivered what, what is remaining behind. In respect of General Electric, I think they have delivered everything. They were left with 4 only to deliver this week.
Wow.
I'm not going to give the numbers, but I may say that China South Rail had delivered 190 out of 359 required.
And
Bombardier Transport had delivered about 16 of what is required, and all that were impacted in respect of Bombardier Transport by the relocation to Durban, because they had to set up.
They had to set up again, which is part of the great, broader alleged crime that has been committed at Transnet. So if, say, Siyabonga Gama or Sankajiane, they're disciplined and they are removed from their positions. In this report, there's a special place for people who no longer work for Transnet, right? Popo Molefe, who is also part of this of the order. He used to be the CEO. He is accused of increasing the estimated total cost of the decision to split the award, approving agreements. The recommendation is Popo Molefe is no longer an employee of Transnet. As such, we recommend that Transnet opens a criminal case against him for financial misconduct. And they said that about 6 times in here. one way or another. Now, there's nothing, you don't have to hold a disciplinary hearing.
Yeah.
It's not your problem anymore. You just simply have to go to the police and open a criminal case against Popo Molefe. It's all laid out here. The police can colour it in if they want to, but basically the work is done, yeah.
And more importantly, have you done it, Mr. Molefe?
Have you? Will you? When will you? You know, because seriously, and you know this better than anybody, the South African public is sick of reports and commissions. They want some action. And these people showed two fingers to the public while they were running these companies. And it's not right that they're still out. You know, they should be charged. They should face the consequences of what they did.
No, I agree with you, Peter. But, Peter, I must also say that, and I appreciate the impatience out there with the South African public, because certainly they deserve something much better than we are offering them. But even as we want to do what you say we should be doing, Peter, even if we may do it, it still has to go through very careful and systematic consultation with counsel, with the lawyers.
Yeah.
They've got to establish on evidence that there exists sufficient basis not only to charge, but to prosecute successfully.
No, sure. But it says here...
They say that, but they are not the ones who are going to be giving...
they're not going to be in court.
They're going to be witnesses on every aspect of that thing. So partly the reason why we have to put certain people on precautionary suspension so that we can get more evidence about some of the things. We do have evidence, they have it, but I'm sure there is more. There might well be many people who want to speak the truth. Of course, we'll subpoena them if they don't come forward on their own. But allow us space to follow process.
Okay. Just so that nobody forgets, Anoj Singh, former Chief Financial Officer of Transnet, and of course then like Molefe goes across to Eskom to do the same thing there. Mr. Singh is no longer an employee of Transnet. As such, we recommend that Transnet opens a criminal case against you for financial misconduct. It's also about 3 or 4 times.
Exactly.
It's going to be a bun fight.
Well, let me say that this coming Thursday, the non-executive directors of the company will meet with senior counsel. We hope to meet for about 4 hours to go through that report and how we deal with it. What are the next steps, including the illegalities pertaining to how we contracted, and dealing with that within the context of the established necessity for the locomotives for the country. Because you don't want to act in a manner that is so reckless that it would impact negatively on the continuity of business in the country.
You know, Dr. Molefe, for ordinary people like Peter says, they are so tired of hearing this. There's like a sense of fatigue. Why should people care what happened to these multi-millions of rands of money? Why is it important that you do your fiduciary duty? Why is it important that criminal charges be laid against these people, that some of them go before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, and more importantly, that the hawks actually do their job? Why is it so important for ordinary South Africans that we actually deal with this matter?
Karima, there are very many poor, millions of poor people in this country. We operate on a very tight fiscus. The SOEs themselves, state-owned companies themselves, have major challenges of mobilizing funding for themselves. Although Transnet is not constantly, has never gone to government begging bowl in hand. But we have to make sure that the resources that we have in these entities and that the government has produce the quality of services and products that will serve the interests of the people of this country, that we address the question of job creation to reduce levels of poverty, to reduce the inequalities amongst our people, and to ensure that we use big organizations like Transnet to stimulate growth in the economy. We've got to do that. But fundamentally, we have the laws in this country, and to the extent that we come to the conclusion that those laws have been violated, we have to act.
And people have to be held accountable.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. That is, of course, Board Chairperson Popo Molefe speaking to us about the cleanup. Still up ahead on The Fix, we look at the state of the economy. President Cyril Ramaphosa's economic advisor, Trudy Makaya, is our next guest.